Sorry. Saying I'm a bit late to the party with the R18. Yeah, it's a 100-year edition, you see, mate, so, you know, I'm not. Oh, it's been done. I'll go do it anyway. Well, I'm here at BMW Motorrad in Dublin to test drive the R18 100-year edition. Let's go. They just told me I have to take my GoPro off. Hey? Just for that, I'm going to make a real shit video about his R18 and say it's rubbish. I've written it now. I actually can't say it's rubbish because it's not. Well, that was a fantastic ride. It was a wet, drizzly ride out to Skerries and back, so about an hour on the road. About a third of the ride I had it in rain, which actually worked well because the roads are quite wet and greasy. But I tried rock and roll as well, and they make a big difference. So that rain mode is useful. Oops. I lost traction in a straight line in roll, but I was in a straight line and I was accelerating reasonably hard, but it didn't fluster the bike or me. It just spanned the rear end up temporarily. What a great bike. Unfortunately, I couldn't film the ride. The BMW ride leader no photography or no video cameras allowed. So that was a bit of a shame. So I can't give my real life experiences on the bike. But I can remember it all. It's a mad bike. It's a great bike. I'm delighted bikes like that exist. It's completely mad. And I went to ride the bagger and I was down and registered to ride the bagger, and then my name was called out. I got given the keys and I got given the 100-year edition, which, if I'm honest, before the ride I would have chosen over the bagger, and it didn't disappoint. Now the 100-year edition is just a styling exercise and whatnot, and a few extra features and whatnot, but it's really nicely done, like really nicely done. If I was ever to buy an R18, it would be it'd be the 100-year edition. I'd have to get rid of the floorboards and get rid of the toe heel shifter. What it does, it requires you to lift your boot off the floorboard, and when you're wearing big heavy boots and you're already in a reasonably, with the low seat height, the seat to floorboard distance is quite short anyway. There's a reasonable amount of pressure on your lower back and hips. And personally, that bike would be much nicer for me with the tall seat. And I know there is a tall seat option on the bagger, so I'd have to look and see if there's one for the standard R18. I'm sure there is. I'd go for the tall seat, and I'd go back to the standard gear shift, and I think that would give you another 30 or 40 mil. I did take a picture, a bit of video of the two different systems. So I found it a little bit cramped on the hips on the standard R18 and R18 Special Edition or 100-year edition. But I think you could do something about that with, as I say, the seat and going back to the regular gear change. So I really enjoyed that test drive. It was a marvellous bike. Being heavier than average, 18.5 stone, I wanted to jack the rear preload up before it even got on the bike, assuming it was in the factory stock position, which it would have been. I wanted to jack the rear preload up. I just couldn't find an adjuster for it. Nothing that I could find in the 60 seconds I had looking over the bike. And if you're thinking of buying an R18, ignore the first year's worth of launch videos where all the road testers are riding them, scraping the pegs and floorboards over the flimsiest of corners. According to the forums, the bikes were delivered with the preload set in the lowest position to fit in the crate, and that the dealers had forgotten to put the preload back to the normal road going position. So you see some you see some people go around the slightest of bends scraping the pegs. That's not the case. I'm heavy, 18.5 stone. I was going around some pretty tight corners in Dublin here, and I couldn't scrape the pegs once. No, I'm no Eddie Lawson. Handling, I didn't think was too bad. I don't think I'd want to go across the Wicklow Mountains back and forward with it, but riding around on decent roads, I think it'd be fine. One thing that took me by surprise straight away was how good the suspension was, even though it's only 120 at the front, which that's kind of okay. That's kind of normal for a road bike. It's only 90mm travel at the back. I thought that might be the bike's Achilles heel a little bit, and when I was going to be riding the bagger, I was going to make a bit of a big deal about the rear end being 120mm. But I was pleasantly surprised with the way the 90mm cope with the road surfaces. The suspension on it reminded me a little bit about how my CB1100 is. Quite controlled, but quite forgiving at the same time. So yeah, I like the suspension on that. Non-adjustable. It's got to be adjustable for preload at the back. Some of my weight, I think what would have improved the cornering slightly. Now, I'm not saying the cornering is bad. The cornering is fine. You just had to think about it a bit more than most bikes. Like, you don't even have to think about it on this bike. So on the feedback form, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 in total. Most things were 5 out of 5. Fit and finish. The feel of the thing, the ease of use, the riding. There was nothing complex about that bike, which is great. It's a bit like my CB1100. It's an air-cooled bike, and it has ABS, and that's it. Okay, this one has traction as well, but it needs it. As I say, I lost traction, but it is a drizzly day. The rest of the bike mimics the ethos of that engine. I mean, it's an overhead valve, so the valves are actuated by a push rod. The tappets are sitting on a camshaft above the crankshaft inside the engine. So there's 2 camshafts, one for each cylinder. And you have the tappet sitting on that camshaft lobe, a push rod, and then that is acting on another lever mechanism doing the valve opening and closing. Simplicity itself. fact no different or very similar to this MG here. So I love that the rest of the bike's ethos follows the ethos of the engine. It's just a simple bike. Yeah, look, you're not going to go camping on this or touring on it, you know. You're just not. Yep. I'd hate to throw luggage and all sorts on this bike. Especially this 100-year edition. It just looks glorious the way it is. I think a lot of people are getting the R18 confused. You see words like Harley killer, most powerful BMW. Well, it isn't. The bagger to beat and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that was BMW's intention ever. It is a pure heritage bike. It's a pure heritage play. It's a bit like this Honda CB1100. This is an 1140cc air-cooled inline-4. It only makes 90 PS metric horsepower and 91 newton meters of torque. For an 1140cc engine, you know, that's quite modest. And the R18 is in that guise. It's only making 92 PS. Gobs more torque, of course, but then that's that low rev, big piston sort of bike. 150 newton meters of torque compared to 91 for something like this. And this will be higher up the rev range, obviously, being a bike that revs higher. But so comparing this bike to other big water-cooled bikes or anything like that, it's not the right comparison. And look, there's no comparison with things like Diavels or, you know, Ducati Diavels and Triumph Rockets and stuff like that. That's not where that bike is playing. They're not heritage bikes. And look, Harley have been developing that V-twin for so long. What are they making now? What do you think I am, memory man? Yeah, the Milwaukee 8, they're making 104 PS, again, metric horsepower, and 168 newton meters of torque. They're not really competing with Harley on power or torque, really, on that R18. And I don't actually think that was ever BMW's intention with that engine. It's a bit of a, well, apart from being a heritage play, as I say, I can see it being, it's big in that custom scene because it's such a gorgeous bike to do it with and stuff like that. And the bagger and the transcontinental, that's another play on it. And some people are going to want that. But you know, when you ride that bike, to me, it's definitely the sort of thing you just go out and breeze out to the coffee shop or do a 50-mile day or maybe a 100-mile day and have a bit of fun. I don't think it's a serious motorbike. And I think it's just an expression of BMW engineering and retroness. And it's fantastic for that. I don't think it has to be compared to anyone else's bike because nobody makes anything like that. So I went to test drive the bagger and came away with the 100-year edition. Now they've made a good stab at the bagger. Well, made a good stab. They've made obviously more than a good stab at the bagger. They've made some considerable changes to the chassis on that bagger and that transcontinental. They've added 30 more millimeters rear suspension travel, and they've made the rear preload automatic. Automatic rear preload, I think, is the best thing since sliced bread. Whatever about adjustable damping and dynamic damping and everything like that, auto rear preload is brilliant, because I truly believe 85% of motorcyclists use rear preload in the wrong way or don't even bother changing it. How about the weight of that R100? 350 kilos or 345 kilos? 345. Yeah, 50 kilos lighter than the bagger. Do you know what? It's so low, it's very manageable. And obviously it's down to those those big jugs sticking out the side, like it is on this bike. It's manageable. If I wanted a kind of, look, that's definitely a cruiser poser bike, right? That's it. You'll be taking that thing up Lara for a cup of coffee and a bit of carrot cake. And you know the fellas up there will be going, nah, you know you can't tour on that, there's nowhere to put your tent and everything like that. And you go, I fucking know. I'm just posing, man. and it's perfect for it. It's absolutely perfect for it. So yeah, I'd have it as a bike. I wouldn't ride around Europe on it on a Pyrenees holiday tour or anything, but you got to mark a bike up or down for what it's intended for, not for what it can't do. So this bike is, that R18 is just pure indulgence. You can go and take your Tiger or your GS around the Alps. So yeah, torque, it's all between 2 and 4,000 RPM. You can absolutely hustle. Geez, I can't find my gear stick on this bloody thing now. I got used to that R18. So apart from the seat peg gear lever that I mentioned at the start there's nothing I could fault about that bike. Absolutely nothing. It is what it is. It's an experience bike. There's a few bikes like that. It's an experience bike. One you leave in the garage over winter, bring it out during the summer. So that was my impressions. That the seat was actually reasonably comfy, but it wants to be taller to give you a bit more relief on the hips, a bit more distance between pegs and the seat. And I get rid of that heel toe shifter because it's far too tall, so you're lifting your heavy boot and your leg right up to change gear. That's the only thing I'd change on it. The sound of the engine is fairly muted until you give it a bit of welly, and then it makes a lovely sound. So perfect. That was it. I don't think we'll go on any longer about it.